Doug stole my thunder when he asked you all to raise your hands. That was my first thing I was going to say, but of course, he had to do that.
Do it again.
So,
Yeah, do it again. Do it again.
yeah, just put your hands up again if you had Ted for a teacher.
All right, put your hand up.
Quite a bunch of us here had Ted for a teacher. I did too. I'm going to tell you some things about Ted that you probably didn't know, and a few little stories. And I'll start off, I've got a written thing here, but I hate to watch somebody read off a paper, so I'm going to ad-lib as much as I can. Who was Ted? Well, he was my uncle. He was my school teacher. He was my dad's brother. And I want to point out my dad was the second commander in this legion. His picture's on the wall up here, second one. So we have a deep history here. Our family came in here in the 1890s. And we've been here a long time. We left, and now we're back. So Ted was born the fifth of 6 children. He had 3 older sisters, Fern, Wilma. Bill's here. Bill is Wilma's son. Mabel and an older brother, my father Chet, and then a sister Letha. In November of 1933, Ted's father died. Ted was 9 at the time. That's my phone. Turn it off, will you? It's ringing in my ears. I got hearing aids. My dad quit school when his dad died so he could take over the duties of the man of the house, along with his sister Fern and her husband Henry Young. From what I gathered from stories told by the family, Ted was the prodigal son. I think everyone that knew Ted kind of gathered that. He never had to work as hard as the older kids and was greatly favored by his mother. Ted was in charge of Bill and I one time when we were little. He was supposed to be babysitting us, and Grammy, my dad's mother, Ted's mother, caught us playing in the irrigation ditch. I don't know if you remember this story, Bill. I think we got a switch all the way back to the house. I don't think Ted got in trouble. He was asleep on the couch. Another memory I have of Ted was, this is a good memory, when I was about 4 or 5, I can't remember, we were haying, and he taught me how to spell the word psychology. And I thought I was the smartest kid in the world at that time because he taught me how to spell that word. And I really looked up to Ted at that time. He was rather a handsome devil, so as you will know that knew him. Ted went into the service when Second World War was nearly over, actually, when he went in. And he trained as a pilot, but he never made it into actual battle. When he returned from the war, he was kind of in limbo for a while, and then he went to college at Moscow. And he returned to Swan Valley and married Sybil Livingston on October 13th, a Friday in 1951. They got married in Bill's mom and dad's house, and we all talked about why would somebody get married on Friday the 13th? And it didn't last. Maybe that's why. In 1953, Ted began his career as a school teacher, and he really found a profession that he was good at. Ted was a good teacher. He was strict, and he expected a lot from his students. Larry and Delbert and Ronald and anybody else here that was in his very first class. Did I miss anybody? I don't think so. They were in the first class he taught at Swan Valley Elementary. What?
5-0. He taught us 50, 51 was his first class.
Okay, 1950 and 51, Larry said, was his first year. I didn't know that. Ted ran the farm in the summer, and he wasn't a really good farmer. I don't think he really put his heart into it. When he had to combine his grain, he had to come and get my mother to run the reels on the combine because he didn't know how. And for you young kids, turn that thing off, will you? Turn it off. I don't know who it is. The reels went around and around, and then you had to have somebody there to run them. You pulled the combine behind a tractor at that time, and then you had to have 2 people on the combine someone to run the reels and somebody to load the sacks. So it was quite a labor-intensive thing compared to what they do now with the self-propelled combines. And I don't have any idea how they work now. That's way beyond my expertise. Anyway, Ted had to come up and get Mom to come and run the reels on the combine for him because he had no idea how to do it. So Ted got involved with Pine Basin Ski Hill at one point. I don't remember the year for that, but I do remember he borrowed my dad's truck and loaded a spool of cable in the back of the truck. It might have been when they were putting in the bigger lifts, and didn't secure it well and went around the corner up near the ski hill, and the cable rolled and it tipped the truck over. Didn't hurt anybody, and it really didn't do much damage to the truck. It just put a dent in the top of the cab. On the day after Thanksgiving in 1958, Grammy died in the house that all the kids were raised in the house, we called it the house up on the hill up on Chapel Road. When she died, Ted ended up getting the farm. I'm not sure how that all happened, but he ended up with the farm and the house. And a few years after Grammy's death, Ted gave away that big 2-story house, and it was moved to Wilson, Wyoming. The mover that bid that job didn't realize that my grandfather, when he built that house, had filled the walls with adobe. And when he went broke just trying to get the house off the foundation, let alone getting it up to Wilson. They had to go up the canyon, of course, and across the bridge, where they also had problems getting it across the bridge. And finally settled it in Wilson, and as far as I know, it's still there and being inhabited. Ted just gave it to the lady, and that was one thing I never forgave him for. I loved that house. I had lots of good memories about that house. But anyway, it's not here anymore, but hopefully somebody's enjoying it like we did. They built a new house, and anybody that knows, it's still on Chapel Road, and Christy, help me, Terry.
Wilson.
Yeah, lives in it.
Christie Road.
In 1959, during Ted's teaching career in Swan Valley, he had a group of 8th graders. Doug was one, Vic was one, Terry was one, Judy was one, and there may be more here. Bart was one. And he said none of them ever used tobacco and signed a contract, he told them that he would pay them each $20. I brought a book that has the article about that in the newspaper. They cornered Ted at our first Damn Kids reunion and reminded him about that contract. And Vic organized for all those kids to get back together, and they met at Vic's house in Idaho Falls, and Ted wrote checks to each one of them. I think that was smart because very few cashed their checks. Instead, they framed them with the article. So anyway, it was a fun thing that he did for the kids, and it was nice that many kids made it through life without smoking or using tobacco. In 1959, Ted's last year of teaching was in Swan Valley, and he moved to Idaho Falls, where he taught at Clary Gale High School. I'm going to tell you a funny story about his teaching at Clary Gale. This was later on, after he taught there for several years. And probably some of the teachers that are here now could verify this, that as time went on, the kids became a little more unruly because discipline kind of fell by the wayside. Well, this kid was a bully, and Ted had it with him, so he picked him up and put him upside down in a garbage can in the hall of the school and put the lid on and sat on it. Of course, he got in a lot of trouble. They didn't get fired, but the principal told him if he did it again, he would lose his job. I think Ted decided to retire not long after that because he didn't like the fact that you couldn't discipline kids. I don't know. Ted and Sybil divorced in 1969, and their daughter Teddy committed suicide in 1970. This was a bad time for both of them. Ted married Sharon Ash Baker in 1970, and they remained married until Ted died in October of 2010. Ted and Sharon retired from teaching in 1987. He taught for 34 years. Another funny story about Ted, he taught driver's ed. And Kurt Williams, who's Ted's nephew, was one of his students. So one time, there's two stories about this. Kurt called me and told me I was going to have him tell him, but he isn't here. So one time he had Kurt and a couple of kids from Swan Valley, and he had a daughter of one of the principals in Idaho Falls, one of the school principals in Idaho Falls, in the car. And they were driving out across Antelope, and Ted was asleep. He was sitting in the front seat asleep. He wasn't a real good driver's ed teacher, but anyway, I guess the girl almost wrecked the car, and he pulled to the side of the road and he said, "Kurt, get in the driver's seat. You kids from Swan Valley know how to drive. You drove all that farm equipment around, so you know how to drive." Another time, they were on their way to Grand Targhee, and that's when he was dating Sharon, and I guess they were sitting in the back seat, and he just had Kurt drive. Kurt said I was probably 14, and he had to drive all the way up the pass and everything to get Grand Targhee, but they made it okay. So anyway, Ted mellowed with age. He came to all the Damn Kids reunions until he died in 2012, I believe it was. He enjoyed hearing about the lives of all his nieces, nephews, grandnieces, and grandnephews. He and Sharon traveled a lot. They traveled almost everywhere. He hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon from the South Rim and up to the North Rim when he was in his early 70s. He stayed fit by hiking and golfing. And Ted's survived by his widow Sharon, his daughter Debbie, two granddaughters, Christian and Donia, and a great-grandson. Sharon still lives in Sun City West in Arizona. Debbie lives in India in a commune. Christian, Debbie's daughter, lives in Iowa. And Donia, Teddy's daughter, and her son live in Salt Lake. So does anybody else have any funny story they want to share about Ted? I know Jackie might share a story, but it wouldn't be a good one. Anybody else? No? Okay, didn't take me 20 minutes, did it?